We're going to take notes and have lots of questions, right? Okay. Take notes and have lots of questions. Okay. Genesis 3. But I'm going to go back into Genesis 2 just a tad. But how many of us want to, I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot here. But how many want to blame women for what's going on wrong in the world? Whenever you come to scriptures, I think women have got a bad rap, especially right here. You know, like I used to say, did you know there are no women in heaven? And someone will say, are you serious? And I'll say, go to Revelation where it says, and the sixth seal was open and there was silence for a span of 30 minutes. And then men are dirt. And you read in Genesis where Yahweh formed man from the dirt, the soil, the dust. So men are dirt. I mean, we tell jokes and we have, you know, they're funny, you know, about the Harley. David rode in on his Harley. And, you know, knee-high and the shoe height, and talk about the smallest people in the scriptures. But apparently some of these things have become doctrine, and women have taken, I think, a bad rap, especially from messed up translations and someone putting their interpretation in the scriptures. And we're listening to songs, and the main characters that we see in Genesis 3 are serpent, Nachash, which that's got another translation for that too. The man and the woman, the bad tree that everybody, you know, we ate from, or they ate from, and the curses that are placed on them. So to go back a little bit, let's look in Genesis 2, since I really didn't do a deep, in-depth teaching for Genesis 2. I want to go to where Yahweh made man. In verse 7 it says, Elohim formed the man out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils breath, or the breath of life. And the man became a living being. And he planted a garden, and he put the man there in the garden. Now this right here says that Yahweh made man. And if you go back in Genesis 1:27, it says Elohim created man in his image, and in the image of Elohim he created him, male and female. He created them, and he blessed them. So we already see that man and woman was created in the image of Yahweh, the image of Elohim. So going back up into chapter 2, verse 25. Let's go to verse 24. For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. That word cleave means to be glued together like glue. They stick together. And they shall become one flesh, or they shall exist as one flesh. And verse 25, and they were both naked, the man and his wife, yet were not ashamed. Genesis 3:1, and the Nachash, or serpent, was more crafty than all the lives or beasts of the field which Yahweh Elohim had made. And we'll stop right there. We get to some words, and we try to form like a play on words. Hebrew does do a lot of plays on words. And they'll come here and they say naked, which is arumim in Hebrew, and it means to be naked. And then you got arum in 1, where it talks about the serpent being crafty. So how do you get naked and crafty? So let's see how we get naked and crafty. There's been a whole lot of teachings on this, but I'm going to try to simplify it before I really get into this chapter, because I want to do this verse by verse, or try to anyway. They say that some of them teach that the serpent here, Nachash, was more naked than a man and woman. I don't know how in the world you can be more naked than a man and a woman, but this is some of the teachings that they do. Some of them say that it means crafty, and that after man and woman were naked, they ate the fruit, they became more naked, so they became crafty like the serpent. So they keep going from naked to more naked. And, you know, I don't know how you can be more naked if you're naked. So here's my opinion, and I'm going to give my opinion. In Hebrew, especially in ancient Hebrew, and you see this in Aramaic. Aramaic now has an ayin and a gayin, a deep guttural sound. In ancient Hebrew, before it became Paleo-Hebrew, you had another letter, and this is attested to in ancient script, which is Shemitic script. Like Arabic is Shemitic language, Aramaic, Phoenician, the Canaanite languages. This is a twisted rope, and this was a gayin, a deep guttural sound. And this is an ayin, the shape of an eye. These evolved into what we have modern Hebrew, the ayin. We know this when we go in and we see the Septuagint, which this is Greek. This is Gomorrah, starts with a G. But in Hebrew, it's Amorah with the ayin. So this right here shows that we have this. There are certain words that have two different meanings. In English, it's not really that problematic for having different meanings for one word, like cool or bad. That's bad, could be it's bad. Or if I say that car is bad, it's not bad, it's awesome. So we do that. So this right here shows us when we go to Septuagint that this letter in the Hebrew is an evolved letter from two different letters that sounded the same, and they evolved into one letter. And this is Aza, or Gaza. And in Greek is Gazan, which becomes Gaza. So you got Arabic keeps them separated, and other Middle Eastern languages will keep the I and the Gayin separated. But the Hebrew has kind of put them into one letter. And translators have a problem with this, especially when they start trying to see words that are spelled the same but have different meanings. I think it was because it was actually spelled different. And here's one of the things. In Greek, there's a different word used for crafty, for the serpent. And there's a different word used for naked. So there's two different words here. So I think it's two different words. So, what do these words mean? In Genesis 25, the word naked can also mean without a barrier, without a covering. There was no covering, there was no barrier. And it says they were not ashamed, but the word here for not ashamed actually means they had not fallen into disgrace, or they were not put to shame. So what Moses, or Moshe, is saying at the very beginning is that there was no covering, there was no barrier between them and Yahweh. They were there. They were made in his image. He brought the animals to Adam to name the animals and see what that he would call them. He created woman, or he built woman up for man. Banah means to build up from an existing foundation, and he brought her to man. So they had free access to Yahweh right there. Okay. I think they were probably physically naked, but that's right. And they're using I think it's two different words here, showing that they haven't fallen from grace, they haven't been put to shame, because the word also can mean prudent. And prudent means to be marked with wisdom. Prudent, if someone is prudent or shrewd, Yeshua said, be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. He doesn't mean be like a snake in the grass. He means to be prudent. It's a mark of wisdom. And that word is also used, and wisdom, when we come to an English language, we have to have good and bad. We see one word is good and a different word is bad. But in Hebrew, words were neutral. They could either be good or bad, like Kodesh, which they translate holy, but it means to be set apart. It can be used to be set apart for evil, or it can be used to be set apart for something good. And here, there's no barrier there, which means they had a mark of wisdom already. And the serpent, Nachash, which Nachash is interesting. They translate it serpent. Now we've got a serpent in Egyptian mythology that was an enemy to Ra. And if you want to look, which we see here, Genesis like it is a polemic against the teachings there in Egypt. Now the serpent symbolized fertility, good, evil, harm, protection, healing, wisdom, cunning, trickery, and power. Pharaoh's crown that he wore had a cobra coiled around it. And it was a symbol of power. And it was believed that that serpent would spit out fire against Pharaoh's enemies. So what happened when Israel came out of Egypt? And they went the Red Sea, and what was between the Egyptians and Israel? A flaming fire. So, I mean, you see the similarities there, that Yahweh dealt against, it said that he was going to judge all the mighty ones, all the gods of Egypt is what he was issuing judgment on. And we see this here. Now, as far as saying that Moses is making a, polemic against the serpent teaching, I don't know, which I have an opinion about, serpent teaching invading the church, which you got that as Kundalini, which if you know dance, there's a Kundalini, which is the serpent that entwines with your spine, and you get a lot of jerking. It's a possession. And that's in a lot of charismatic movements. You see them jerking and shaking and bobbing and weaving and all that. It's Kundalini. That's where they get a lot of this stuff from. Kundalini. So, we got Nachash. Nechoshet in Hebrew means copper. And then you got the same word can be used for bronze. And it's also can mean divination or to divine. So, you could actually say instead of serpent, you could say the shining one, which is, I think, would be better to call it the shining one. Because it's a serpent, and the reason a serpent is shining is if you've ever seen snakes in the early morning, if you go hunting, like I used to do when I was growing up, and you see a snake sunning on a rock when you're down at the Beaver Creek Dam or something where the rocks are there, and they would get out on the rock and they'd sun, you'd see the sunlight glistening on top of them with the moist air around them, and they looked like they were shining. So, they're shining. Jewish teachings said that and some people teach this, that the serpents had legs and all the animals in the garden talked. I used to believe that. I don't think I believe it anymore because I don't think this was an actual serpent, but it was the shining one who is pictured as a serpent, or the dragon of old. And I get this when you go to Ezekiel. Turn over to Ezekiel. Ezekiel 28. And I'll show you why I believe this is a shining one and not a serpent. Ezekiel 28:12 says, Son of man, take up a lamentation for the sovereign of Sor, and you shall say to him, Thus says the Master Yahweh, you are sealing up a pattern complete in wisdom, or you are the seal of wisdom, perfect in loveliness. You are in Eden, the garden of Elohim. Every precious stone was your covering, the ruby, topaz, diamond, beryl, shoham, the jasper, sapphire, turquoise, emerald, and gold. The workmanship of your settings and mountings was prepared for you on the day you were created. You were the anointed cherub that covered. And I placed you. You were on the set-apart mountain of Elohim. You walked up and down on the midst of the stones of fire. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created until unrighteousness was found in you. So this right here is a lamentation against the king of Sor, or I even forget. I mean, it's called Sor in here. Tyre and Sidon. Right here, this is a lamentation that Ezekiel is given against his king, but he's pointing back to the Garden of Eden. And who was in the Garden of Eden that created unrighteousness? He's called a serpent here. Now, when I was growing up and when I worked as a police officer, I would call people, if there's someone I didn't particularly care for, they were kind of sneaky, I call them a snake in the grass. Over in especially in the Eastern mindset, and I used to study martial arts since I was little, the Eastern mindset was a serpent when it crawled on its belly, because you see that we'll get to the curse in a minute. Serpent represented evil. It represented cunning. And I think this is the shining one, and he's called a Nachash. He's called a serpent because he's cunning and crafty. But I think he's Satan, our adversary. That's right here. It's not a serpent that has legs and arms. It's that spiritual being that was created, who was one of the anointed ones, who was a set-apart cherub. Any questions before I go? Okay. So this is why I think it's not more naked, but he's just crafty. It's a different word here. And it says, and here's what he says to the woman. He says to the woman, Is it true that Elohim has said, Do not eat of every tree of the garden? Actually, I like the way the Septuagint has it. It says, Why did Elohim say that you cannot eat from every tree of the garden? So what does she do? She answers his question. And the woman said to the Nachash, or the serpent, shining one, We are to eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, Elohim has said, Do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die. And the Nachash said to the woman, You shall certainly not die. Or the way I have it, you will not die, because Elohim knows or is aware that in the day that you eat from it, your eyes will be open, and you will be as sovereign ones, understanding good and evil. Now that's nice. You want to be like, who wants to be like Yahweh? How many of us want to be like our Father? He said to be set apart, Kodesh, as He is set apart. To be perfect as He is perfect. We're to strive to be like Him. And the serpent here says, why did he say this? Why did he say not to eat from every tree? He said because he knows, he's telling the woman this, he said he knows that when you eat from it, you're going to be like Him. But what did we just learn in Genesis 1? In Genesis 2? They were already created like Him. So this is how cunning He is. So, He says, your eyes will be open. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree desirable to make one wise, and she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made loin coverings for themselves. So I remember reading the book right here, when we go back to verse 6, where it said that the woman took from the tree, ate, and gave to her husband. Adam was standing there. It's called The Silence of Adam. And he goes on it's a whole book of arguing how all the problem is because Adam kept his mouth shut while Eve ate from the tree. And all the blame he threw on the man, and the woman was set up on a pedestal. Now I agree women have been trashed, but I think right here she was deceived, and she ate from the tree. But she didn't know she was naked until who ate from the tree? Adam. So why did she not see that she was naked as soon as she ate from it? Because it said to him, it's not like they ate together. She ate from it, and then she gave it to him. Who was told by Yahweh not to eat from the tree? Adam was. We see that in Genesis 2, where it said that he put him in the garden, and he told him, you can eat from every tree in the garden, but do not eat from the tree of the garden, the knowledge of good and evil that's in the middle of the garden. Don't eat from that one. Woman wasn't created yet, or she wasn't formed yet. So Adam was the one that was told not to eat from the tree. And I believe that and this is my opinion, that if Adam had never ate from the tree, even though Eve did, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in. Because I think he's the one that did the disobeying. Not that he was head of the house, as people like, especially Southern Baptists like to put it, that he was head of the household, that he should have been the servant leader. I think that's just trying to sugarcoat them wanting to be kings of their castle. But I think he was there, and he was specifically told not to eat from it. Just him. I think if all of creation would have been here, people could have ate from it, as long as he didn't eat from it. That's just my opinion. Now their eyes are open, and they see that they're naked. They're more naked than the snake, as some teach. And they heard the voice of Yahweh Elohim walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh Elohim among the trees of the garden. There's a word that's similar in spelling to arum. It can also mean to be blind, to not be able to see. And they tried to cover themselves. First we see that they were naked, or they had no barrier between them and Yahweh. They hadn't fallen yet. And Genesis 3 is all about the fall, where we see that they fell from grace, or they're disgraced. They've been put to shame, and they're put to shame because they were deceived by this shining, cunning, deceitful one who is our enemy. And now that they see that they're naked, their eyes are open. I think their eyes are open because of that covering that they were already covered with, was Yahweh's presence, which you see in Israel. If you look in Deuteronomy 28, if you look at the blessing and curses, it said if you obey me, he was a covering over Israel. If you obey what he was saying, you obey his Torah, then you would have all this plenty that was there. You would be the head, not the tail, that everybody, that focuses on, I want to be the head, I don't want to be the tail. Your enemies will run from you. You'll have, in the millennial kingdom, you'll see that the sowers will overtake the reapers because of all the abundance that's there. He's the covering. And when he removes himself, which you see in Ezekiel, when he removed himself from the temple, the enemies trashed the place, and they took Israel into captivity. So I think they knew that they were naked because of the disobedience, and they didn't have that covering, that protection from him anymore. So now they hear Yahweh walking, and this one says in the cool of the day. And the Septuagint it uses in the afternoon. And I think this is important, and I'm gonna get to why in just a minute. It's the windy part of the day. The Septuagint says in the afternoon. It says, so the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh Elohim among the trees of the garden. They made the first ghillie suit, the first camouflage. They sewed leaves around them. They tried to hide in the bushes. It says, Yahweh called unto Adam and said, where are you? So, I've heard that when man sinned, and if you look at Calvinism teaches that man is utterly depraved, and this depravedness comes from sexual union, and that only certain people are saved whom Yahweh chose to save. This is Calvinism. And they go to this place right here and says, see, he hid, he was separated from Yahweh, he was dead, and Yahweh had to pick him to save him. But you got to look at it. He said, where are you? He didn't just walk up to him and say, there you are. I'm pulling him out of the bushes. He asked, where you at? He knew where he was at. How many of you think that he knew where he was at? I do. He knows everything. He says, where are you? And I think that's the same thing with salvation. Yahweh is calling to everybody. But you have to come to him. You have to pay attention to his voice and come to him. Everybody has a free choice to come to him. And this is what we see in verse 10 where it says, I heard your voice in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself. So Adam heard his voice, and even though he was naked, he came before him. So salvation is open to everybody, in my opinion. I hate Calvinism. I despise Calvinism. So if anybody likes it, I apologize. I can't stand it. No, I don't apologize. I can't stand Calvinism. I hate Calvinism. Verse 11. Let me quit shooting that rabbit. And he said, who made you to know that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you should not eat? And I said, who told you this? So the man responded, the woman, here we go, fill in the blame. The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave to me from the tree, and I ate. Then Elohim said to the woman, what is this you've done? Or as the Septuagint has, which I like better, says, why have you done this? So the woman said, the Nachash, this shining one, serpent, made me believe a lie. So I ate. You got the first throwing of the blame. Whenever you go to someone, and I used to do this when I'd ride up, get a call to go somewhere. Like, I remember one of some kids, and I got called to a lights being shot out by a BB gun. And you got like 5 youngins standing around there and all got BB guns. Who shot out the light? I pulled up and asked that, and they all started blaming each other. It's the blame game. So what happens here? They didn't know they were naked until Adam ate from the tree. He says, who told you that you're naked? He didn't say, the serpent told us that we were naked. He said, a woman that she did it. He pointed the finger. He didn't take the blame. That's one mistake. So then he asked Hawa, her name's not Eve, it's Hawa, why have you done this? And she said, the serpent deceived me. He made me believe a lie. What was the lie? That she would be like him, that she would be like Elohim. Verse 14, and Yahweh Elohim said to Nachash, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all livestock and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you are to go and eat dust all the days of your life. I'm going to go and read to the end of the chapter. And I put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. To the woman he said, I greatly increase your sorrow and your conception, bringing forth children in pain, and your desires for your husband, and he does rule over you. And remember this one, I'm going to come back to that one. How many thinks that the man rules over the woman? I'm not going to get any hands raised in here. And to the man he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree which I commanded you, saying, do not eat of it, curses the ground because of you, and toil you are to eat of it all the days of your life. And the ground shall bring forth thorns and thistles for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you are to eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and dust you return. And the man called his wife's name Hawa, because she was the mother of all living. And Yahweh Elohim made coats of skin for the man and his wife, and dressed them. And Yahweh Elohim said, see, the man was like one of us to know good and evil. And now lest he put out his hand and take also the tree of life and eat and live forever. So Elohim sent him out of the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. And he drove the man out, and he placed cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way of the tree of life. All right. They say this is the first gospel. And I believe that Genesis, I wanted to teach through Ezekiel, but because I believe that if you need to understand Revelation, you need to understand Ezekiel, you need to understand prophecy. And I think prophecy is first seen right here in Genesis, and it's Genesis 3. Now that I've read it in this translation, I'm going to go to mine, because we start with the serpent. Yahweh Elohim said to the Nachash, the serpent, because you have done this thing, you are cursed more than the beasts and the creatures of the field. You will go about on your belly and eat dust all the days of your life. So this is why they say that this is a serpent, this is a snake, because I had a comic book that had the serpent, and it looked like a dinosaur, that had a whole bunch of arms. And they said now, since this is a curse, all his arms fell off, and he has to crawl around on his belly. I also know someone that used to tell me that if you throw a snake in the fire, you'll see the legs pop out, that they had legs. All it is the muscles of the diaphragm. When the skin is busting because they got tight muscles, that's how they crawl. I mean, there's a lot of weird teachings that go on. Another weird teaching is they say that the woman, Eve, decided to sleep with the serpent, Satan, and now you have something called the serpent seed doctrine. And it said that from her the Nephilim were born. So you got Eve being an adulteress, sleeping with a serpent before she slept with Adam, and now you've got all these supernatural beings, and they say that you can see their eyes are like serpents, and it's freaky, and people are believing this stuff because, one, they're walking away from what true scripture is, and two, people have put their interpretations in the translations, and you've got a whole bunch of false doctrine. So what he's saying is, to be cursed, you're looking at a snake. A snake is, I think this is a derogatory term. We call people, I call men snake in the grass, or that's just a snake. We call, some women will say is a fox, or, we got all these terms. We use animals as derogatory terms to describe people. And I think this is what's going on here. And he's being cursed. But this word cursed means to be bound, to be hemmed up with obstacles, to be set apart from misfortune, and to be afflicted. This is what the word means. So there's going to be an obstacle that's going to be between this Nachash that's going to be put in front of him. And when they say that he is more cursed more than every beast of the field, you see, Adam and Eve, or Adam and Hawa, were in the garden that was separated from the field. All the wild animals were out in the field. They had everything that they ever needed or ever wanted, and it was provided for them by Yahweh. So all the fruit that was there, they could freely eat from it. He didn't say that you need to work the garden. He just said that you're to worship in the garden. And this is the play on words, because we got in Genesis 2, where we had the word can mean either work, toil, or worship. And the other word can be to keep watch over something, to observe it, or to preserve it. And he was to worship. And when we get to the naming of the woman, I'm going to show you why I believe it's worship. They were first put in the garden to worship. They were outside of the field. Everything was there. All the wild predators and stuff were in the field. And this is where this serpent is connected to. And I lost my train of thought. Eating dust is a sign of humiliation. Genesis 3:15, and I put enmity between you, or hostility between you and the woman. Between your seed and between her seed. Now this is not talking about mankind. I believe this is the first pointing to the Messiah, because its seed is singular. And there's a seed that you see from the serpent, or this enemy of man, throughout the hall of scriptures. And his name is Gog. He's an enemy that's always coming up against the children of Yahweh. He's always coming up against to be a leader to destroy Israel. And he comes back in Revelation where the Messiah comes against him. Revelation 19. Gog. You've got Gog in the prophets. Ezekiel talks about him. I think it's Ezekiel 38, 37, 38, 39 in that area. The regathering of Israel might be 39 where you see Gog come back. But there's also, he's there in the prophets, other prophets. He's there. This is his seed. There's always a leader that's going to be brought up because the Messiah is also going to be born from, he's going to be a man, but he's going to be, for lack of a better term, divine. He's going to be Yahweh in the flesh. This shining one, this enemy, this Nachash, serpent, is going to have his seed, which is going to be an individual that he's going to give his power to. He's going to give his authority to. Just like Yahweh gives his authority and his power to the Messiah, who is Yeshua. And this is going to be an enemy of the people, and this is where we see that there's going to be enemy or hostility put between the two. And it's going to be between the woman's seed, which means that the woman is going to have a child. It's a virgin birth. It's the first, I think, the first statement of a virgin birth, and this is where we get Isaiah also showing that it's going to be a virgin birth. Because we all know that it takes a man and woman to have a child, so how's a woman going to have a child apart from the man, other than Yahweh? And it says, to the woman, he said, I will greatly increase your hardship, both physical and emotional pain, in addition to your pregnancy. So you will bear children in toilsome labor. And right here, it says, and your desires for your husband, and he does rule over you. But there's something interesting right here that people tend to ignore. Let me erase this. Whenever you go and you learn Hebrew, you always learn the one for the woman, or her, and for the man. But in the Torah, when Moshe wrote, there's no vowel pointings, and the two look just alike. Context told you which one was for her and which one was for him. And right here you've got Yahweh dealing first with the serpent, saying that there's going to be obstacles. He's going to, the word for curse means to put obstacles in the way. And the word is arah, which is opposite of baruch, which means to bless. Bless means to have prosperity, to have everything, there to be prosperous. And a curse means you're going to have obstacles where you can't be prosperous. But here, and you see this in 3:20, is both of these. This is what it was. It depended if it was a he or who. The context told you whether it was he, which was for a she, or who, which was for a he. Who's on first? What's on second? So instead of saying he shall rule over you, I believe it should be read this way, so that your desires towards your husband and it, talking about the desire, will exercise authority within you, because the other word there is not over, but it means in, or within you, or against you. It can be used for against you. So it can either be within you, or it will exercise authority against you, which will be that desire for a husband. Now, I'm not a woman. I don't know what it feels like to want and desire to have a husband, but I know what it's like to want and desire to have a wife. Because you always want someone to have, or with me, I wanted a wife who I could spend my life with, who I could feel that, that love from, that I could share part of me with. So I don't know if that's the same for a woman, but that's the way it is for me. And honestly, that desire kind of ruled over me because I begged and pleaded with Yahweh to give me a wife, and he did. So, yay. So I don't think this is saying that the man is going to rule over the woman. I know a lot of men would like to have it that way, but I don't think that she was cursed, saying that she's going to be in subjection to the man because she ate from the tree and she gave it to Adam. They go to Paul. Now what does Paul say? Wives, submit to your husbands. He does say that. But they always ignore what it goes down further. It says, husbands likewise love your wives. What does that likewise mean? It means equal, same thing he just said before. So what is the husband supposed to do? Submit to his wife. He submits to his wife in loving her, and that word for love means to take care of her and provide what she needs. Peter, or Kepha, he says to dwell with, wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, dwell with your wife as a weaker vessel. King James, weaker vessel. But the word means fragile, and it's like porcelain. It means fragile and valuable. That's the way you should dwell with your wife, is she's valuable like crystal, porcelain. Not that she's weak and she's not strong. I know a lot of women who are stronger than I am. But it's that she's valuable, and you should cherish her as being valuable. And I believe this verse 16 here has been so mistranslated, and this is just my opinion, that you have the Southern Baptists coming up with the servant leadership, trying to keep women submissive to men as a leader, but then you say he's a servant, and I think that's just sugarcoating a lie, in my opinion. Now we get to the man. Verse 17. And then to the man he said, because you paid attention to your wife's voice, and you ate from the tree which I commanded you, saying, do not eat from it, the soil will be hemmed up with obstacles, or cursed is the soil, on account of you. In toilsome labor you will eat from it all the days of your life. So then, thorn bushes and useless plants will sprout up for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat bread until you return to the soil, because from it you are taken. Because you are dust, and to dust you will return. Now he was put in the garden, had everything there. He could freely eat from everything. He didn't have to toil. He didn't have to work. He just had to be there to worship and to preserve that. That's one thing he was supposed to do, is preserve. He didn't preserve it because he ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And this is where he was going to go out into the field now and eat. And the field is going to produce all these thorn bushes, so it's cursed. There's going to be obstacles to where before he didn't have any obstacles. That is the prosperity, the blessing, Baruch, that he had. Now there's going to be obstacles there, which is arar, which is a curse. And he's going to return to the dust. So now we see that men are dirt. Now verse 20. And the man called his wife's name Hawa, because she was the mother of all living. All right, now it says, in the Septuagint, it has her name as Eve, because Eve means the mother of all living, or the mother of the living. But Hawa in Hebrew actually means to bow down and worship. So I think Adam named his wife Hawa because he knew that they should have bowed down in worship and obedience to Yahweh and not ate from the tree. Now they're being cast out, not just cast out, but according to what it says, they were forcibly thrust. They were actually booted out of the garden. So he named her to bow down and worship. Why? It's because she's the mother of all living. Everyone is going to be coming from her because she's going to bear children. So they're to bow down. Who do we bow down and worship? Yahweh. That's one of the first commandments. We're not to worship anybody but him. And I think that's why he named her Hawa, because mankind is to worship Yahweh. You're to bow down and worship him. That's why Adam was put in the garden to begin with, was to worship and preserve the garden. Now, since he's been kicked out, she's named as a reminder of what, every time he looked at her, he's called her Hawa. He sees her, and when he calls her name, he knows that he should have bowed down and worship, but he didn't. I think that's a reminder of his failure, which is also a great name for his wife, because he looks at her knowing that he sees something that she is actually his strength, which that's what she is called, a counterpart, a helper. That helper means a strength, a military might. And when he sees that he named her, and that's her name, he sees that she is his strength. That's my opinion. Now verse 21 says, Then Yahweh Elohim made leather tunics for Adam and his wife and clothed them. They were naked, but now they're clothed. And this is interesting. Now, I'm going to give you my opinion here. Passover. When is Passover? Nisan 14th. What happened on Passover, Nisan 14th? The lamb was slain. Why was the lamb slain? So that they would live. Now, I know everybody likes to take and they do all the creation in 7 days. First day, second day, all the way up to the 7th day. And they've got sin happening here on the 6th day. Okay? 6th day. And then Yahweh rests. And then we go in from eternity or whatever, or go in time, not eternity, but go into time where sin happens. All right? You've got Passover. It happens on the 14th. Passover is where you slay the lamb and the blood is there as a sacrifice. It's a life for a life. That's what a sacrifice is. Sacrifice is a life for a life. And what they would do is they would lean into that lamb and they would take that lamb's life because that was an innocent dying for them so that they would live. My opinion, this is just my opinion. The first week, on that 6th day, Adam was made. 7th day, Yahweh rested. Woman was built up from man, so even though he rested from his whole creation, he saw woman inside a man. Woman was already there, male and female. You follow me? Let's see, he hadn't taken woman from man yet, but he saw humanity there. Adam means humanity, and humanity is made male and female. She just wasn't built up. Banah, that's why there's two different words. Bara for the man and Banah for the woman. Banah means to build up from an existing foundation. So the next week we have, the first day, Yahweh starts bringing the animals to Adam. And he starts naming them. And at that 6th day, he's named all the animals. He didn't name them all at one time because, he's smart. And I think it could all be probably done, but there's an order for things. And I think Yahweh had him that first week, he was there by himself, naming the animals. What happened when is the Passover lamb sacrificed? Between the evenings. Once between the evenings. Afternoon. When did they hear Yahweh's voice walking in the garden? In the afternoon. On the 14th, which would have been a Sabbath. 14 days. You slay the sacrifice. Even though it's fallen on a Sabbath, you slay it between the evenings of that Sabbath. And he clothed them with skins. Leather tunics. Where did he get the leather tunics? A slain animal. So I think, my opinion, is the first Passover is right here in Genesis. Yahweh is the high priest. Who is our high priest? Yeshua. Who does the sacrifice of the animals? The skins, whenever the priest would sacrifice the animal, they would skin the animal, and the skin belonged to the priest for clothing. Yahweh didn't need the clothing, so he clothed as a sacrifice, I think, the first Passover. And it was 14 days, not just 7 days, but I think on the 14th day, which you see an order of things, you've got his appointed times. What did he say in Genesis 1? That all the sun, the moon, the stars, and all they were for the Moedim, so you would know his appointed times. This is one of his appointed times. It's called Passover, Pesach. I believe all this happened, the sin, on Passover. And the lamb was slain, and they were clothed between the evenings on Passover. That's my opinion. So, we get to verse 22. Then, according to this one, it says, "See, man has become like one of us, to know good and evil." I don't like that translation. It uses the Greek ginomai, but the hayah in Hebrew is past tense. It's the cow verb. We use a form of this. It's a verb to be, and it's past tense. It's was. It could be had become. It could meant have become, has become. It can be translated that way, but it's past tense. If you translate it as has become, I think that would be saying that the serpent was telling the truth. And in some of the commentaries that I read, it says, "See, the serpent was telling them the truth because they ate from the tree. What happened? You'll become like Elohim." And right here it says he's become like one of us. It makes the serpent seem like the serpent told the truth, and I don't like that. But Hayah can mean was, and that's the way it should be translated. And a lot of translations translate it that way, but you or some of them, but they're not mainstream English translations. Young's literal translation translates it that way. So man was like him, like Elohim. He says now he's going to thrust him out of the garden so that he doesn't eat from the tree of life and live forever in this fallen state. And it says that he was thrust out, and I think he was done that and actually mercy, so that man would not eat and live forever. And something else that in the Jewish tradition, that the Torah is considered the tree of life. That's where you get, as it's like a symbolism as a tree of life. And this is Genesis 3. In my opinion, it wasn't a serpent. It was Satan, who is a fallen angel, for lack of a better term, and he's a shining one. And this is what Nachash can mean. He deceived the woman because she was built up from the man, and we have sin there. And I think it's from because he deceived the woman, you have the Messiah being born from the woman. That was in the mind of Yahweh before he ever created to begin with. He knew what was going to happen. And before he created, he knew that, and he provided a way. And we see the first prophetic utterance of redemption and the Messiah coming and the Messiah being divine. And we also see that, I forgot to read that, about the Messiah, the seed's going to crush the head of the serpent, but the serpent, or the Nachash, the serpent's going to crush his heel or bite, piercing his heel. And I think that is our Messiah. That's the gospel. So any questions? Please, questions. Oh yeah. You know, whenever they would conquer in eating the dust all the days of your life, crawling on your belly, what they would do is you'd see it in old kung fu movies where they would stand with their legs spread, and whenever they conquered somebody, they'd make them crawl on their belly between their legs. And it was a sign of humility. And it was, I forgot to talk about that, being naked too. It was a sign of humility and shame that they were conquered. And they'd also lay them on their backs, and they'd put their foot on their throat, showing that they were conquered. And this right here is a symbol of showing that the serpent is conquered. Another thing that I forgot to mention too is about naked. You know, in Genesis 2:25, the man, they had a mark of wisdom. They were not disgraced yet, or they had not been put to shame. The word naked also means to be shamed. And in there it talks about how, you know, when Israel was being unfaithful, Yahweh said that I'm going to put you out there and I'm going to flip your skirt over top of your head and I'm going to expose your private parts and I'm going to put you to shame. That's naked, being put to shame. Now they were not shamed, but now since they ate, they are put to shame. That's why they're naked. And they had to be clothed by Yahweh. But this is, crawling around on your belly is a sign of humiliation and being conquered. That's in that culture. We don't see it that way because we have to, you know, we got to just either be black or white. But we don't see any gray. Any other questions? I hope I didn't bore y'all. Mm-hmm. 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 That's right. Mm-hmm. He didn't obey. Yeah, that's what I think. Chawah means to bow down and worship. He was put in there to worship and obey. Now he's been kicked out. He's got to till it. And he's got to keep it. Yeah, I forgot to mention that because that word used for to that desire, longing for her husband, and it ruling over you was same word used in Song of Songs, where the bride, the Shulamite woman, is her desire is for her bridegroom. It's the same word, and it's only used in Genesis and there in the Song of Solomon as a desire wanting the bridegroom. So, I think the desire. Because in the Hebrew, I know it's translated, "He will rule over you," because it said that your desire will be for your husband, but it uses this right here. Either a hirik would make it she, or a shurik would make it a he. But there's no vowel points there's no vowel points in Hebrew. Those are put there by the rabbis. So I don't think it's pointing to the husband. I think it's pointing to her desire, exactly the way you said. They're now separated. Hey! What questions do you have? You can't drive home, but... Yeah, any comments, please? You got the vowel points there, right? Okay. Go to same thing. Yeah. Biblical Hebrew. This is the way it looks. You have to, all throughout the Torah, and I looked, all throughout from Genesis to Deuteronomy, this is the way it's written. In its context. Context tells you whether or not it's going to be he or she. There's no neuter. And there's no neuter in Hebrew. There's a neuter in Greek. And Greek is altu. But guess what? This is masculine and neuter. So it could be either one. Neuter. I think it's going to be actually neuter, but it's pointing, it would be feminine pointing to her desire, not pointing to her husband. And I don't think the curse was that the man is going to rule over his wife and dominate her, the way it said. But it's going to be her desire. Because the men that followed after Yahweh did everything they could to love and cherish the wives. Look at Abraham. Unfortunately, he obeyed his wife and slept with Hagar. And look at the mess that got him into. But I mean, he didn't dominate and rule over them. And I think that should be not he, like who, for the masculine, but it should be he for she. Because it's same in Genesis 3:20. Same exact word. I'm not the only one that says that either. Linda Bevel, if you look at, she wrote for Women in the Ministry, for Egalitarian, which she points that out. And she does a better job of explaining it than I do. That there's a lot of places in there, in Scripture, especially Old Testament, that women were in places of leadership. Deborah, Huldah, the prophetesses that were there. I mean, they were in places of leadership. So it's not that man was dominating over her, but it was her desire for him was going to, dominate her. It's her desire. Yeah, unfortunately, how many of us have our desires that dominate over us? Humanity bows in worship. Adam means humanity. Hawa means bow in worship. Humanity bows in worship. You got a Hebrew text there with you? It's a lot different than Hebrew. But it's got lo, you will not eat. It's got lo there as a negative, which means don't you eat from it. So it's like walking in the cool of the day. If you look at it, it's a hithpael, which means he was walking back and forth. I forgot to bring that out. It's a hithpael, which means it's a reflexive intensive, which means he was walking in the cool. He was walking, heard him walking in the cool of the day. Means he heard Yahweh walking back and forth in the garden, looking for him, saying, "Where are you? Where are you?" The walking back and forth would be. It'll have the hay and pile, which would be shows the hithpael. Oh yeah. Any more questions? Oh good. You got your Hebrew text. That's going to keep me on my toes. All right. I want to pray for what happened over there in Paris that we heard. There's a lot of bad stuff, and I hope it doesn't come over here. But unfortunately, it probably is. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for being with us today, and I want to thank you for your shalom, your blessings that you've also given to us, your peace. And I'd just like to ask, if you would, to extend that over to all the families in France and Paris, where, and not just the concert, but all the places where there was an attack, and the ones that have lost family and loved ones, and those that are hurt and wounded, and the ones that are critical, Lord. Father, heal them and help them and just be with them. Be with each and every one of us as we leave here today, and help us to grow in our knowledge of who you are and to continue to walk in that path towards you. We love you and praise you. Amen.